Well, thank you for all those introductions. So just a quick little background, why are we meeting here today? NLPS is growing in size and scale across the state. Very important, especially in the dual credit programming that we offer, with all 450 high schools and career centers across the state. As we kind of get ready for the next iteration of NLPS, it's already largely kind of been established, and as we're getting ready to build it out, as we have transitions with different people and personnel in different positions, just good to give an overall refresher for how NLPS works. And then for those who are new, that basic introduction, so that way you can be better versed in it. So, whether you're a veteran like Verl and Glenn, or someone new like Shabir, hopefully there'll be something here for all of you. So with that being said, I'm going to share the slide deck here, and I will let Tony start talking. If anyone has any questions, feel free to either virtually raise your hand or just get off mute and ask your questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So with that, Tony, I will yield the floor to you.
Thanks, Mark. And I do apologize. I'm working from home today. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. I was traveling for the last week or so at a couple conferences, and I think it finally caught up with me. But I really didn't want to miss this meeting, so I hope you'll kind of bear with me. I know the throat's a little scratchy and the voice may sound a little gruff, but not intentional by any means. But and I really want to, Mark, if we can go to the next slide. I think this slide may be the most important slide of the whole thing, because I think it's the slide that kind of demonstrates the why is there this partnership between Ivy Tech and the Office of CTE. But it really just comes down to, because we're all trying to accomplish the same things. And when we start looking at this, I mean, we know how much the pathway with outcomes is a priority for Ivy Tech. That co-development model of talent is something that you guys work for on a daily basis. And then as we start to think about the meaningful outcomes for students, whether we're talking about a high school student or an adult that is returning, it doesn't matter. We're still trying to get the same thing, same different outcomes. And I would even say that this could be summarized, like, I know your new promotional campaign is kind of about making the difference in an individual's life, and that's all we were trying to do. So we've always felt like we were on the same page and working towards the same goals. And we really do appreciate the partnerships that we have had with Ivy Tech and Vincennes, DOE, and the Commission for Higher Education. This has been a lot of work. I will also tell you, I have had the really good fortune here over the last 5 or 6 months to be in a lot of conferences, talk to a lot of different states around, what they're doing with their pathway model. And every time when we talk about what we're doing in Indiana and the partnership that we've created, the response is, how did you do that? So we really are, I think people are starting to kind of look at like what we've done and say, man, that's really the gold standard for, creating this secondary to post-secondary pathways and really kind of blurring those lines between secondary and post-secondary. So with that said, we'll kind of dive in a little bit as to why we needed to do the next level programs of study. If you can think back to 4 or 5 years ago, those that have been involved in this, you probably have some idea around like what the CTE system was actually like, and we were unique in that sense as well. We had this course structure that schools could offer a course from 2 credits per year to 6 credits per year. There was really no way for us to know what students were covering in those courses, how far they were getting. And because of that, this idea of a CTE concentrator had no meaning. There was no, if a student said they were a CTE concentrator in welding, it really didn't mean anything. What we're hoping with the next level programs of study is kind of the same thing that you can say with, like, around your certificates, that if a student earned a certificate, then we know that this is what they know, this is what they should be able to do. So that's what we've tried to do with the next level, or with the concentrator status. But, and I know you've talked about this a lot, random acts of dual credit. We had students that were earning, 60 hours worth of college credit, but they weren't getting a credential to go along with it. And so because of that, unless it was, they could transfer bits and pieces of that, but that's really tough on the students, and that doesn't really serve them very well. And I think that the last part of this is, and most people don't know this, but Indiana is one of the states that actually invests additional funding into their CTE programs above and beyond the Perkins aspect of this. And that is done through, it's really done through two ways. I mean, one, post-secondary is funded through dual credit. But then also at the secondary level, schools are for given funding, additional tuition support for CTE enrollments. But I think the difference is that really is an investment by the state. And what we were being challenged with was, we're not getting much of a return on our investment in terms of student outcomes. So all of these things were problems for us. These were the things that we were trying to fix and to challenge. But so as a result of this, and this was, we didn't get this right on the first go around. I'm not sure we got it right on the first 2 or 3 go arounds, but we finally settled on a model where we have 3 concentrator courses that represent 6 credit hours, and then we had a capstone course. Part of the reason for this model, why this model was chosen though, is because we knew in the secondary space, Project Lead the Way pathways were very popular for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons why they were popular is because they were easy for schools to manage, and career centers could do them, comprehensive high schools could do them, and the standards were really defined for them. Now, there's some other aspects to Project Lead the Way that we weren't trying to duplicate, but their course structure, their course sequence structure was one that we thought gave us the best advantage, or the best opportunity to gain the consistency and the quality that we were looking for without making it impossible for either career centers or comprehensive high schools to do this. So if you're familiar with the secondary level on grad pathways, and one of those grad pathways is to earn CTE concentrator status, what that means is a student has to complete that principles, the concentrator A and the concentrator B course, to be a concentrator. The capstone course has 2 aspects to it. Is one, it should get you to credential completion, and it should cover the remaining technical courses that are required for the technical certificate. And it should embed some work-based learning experiences. You can see over there that we did 65 of these. Ivy Tech, VU, CHE, all of us presented it in ASEP, and the one thing we told them was, don't do 65 of these at one time. Like, whatever you do, don't do that. That was a major part of the challenge, but we got through it, and we're better off for it now. But that was kind of a tough haul. But any questions about this, please feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. And same thing, Mark, if you have something that from the post-secondary perspective that you want to share, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and if anyone does have their hand up, the way I'm sharing my screen, I can't see anyone right now. Maybe I can change that. But I will add that, you see this graphic here, and it says principles 2 credits, concentrator A 2 credits, capstone 2 to 6. That's from the high school secondary perspective. We'll get into this in a little greater context later on. But, in some of it, depending on the sequence, the principal's course might be 2 Ivy Tech courses, or maybe it's just one, depending on, the particular program. But this graphic up here is from the high school perspective. So 2 credits. And each high school does this a little bit differently. Some high schools might have like a 4-year pathway, for whatever, CTE program that you want to pick. And, a career center might offer it, in 2 years, using 2 periods in the afternoon. How this looks at each high school and career center is going to be a little unique depending on, what the local community needs are, the scheduling, like bus schedules, for instance, things like that. So just keep that in mind, that it's, Tony's done a really good job of designing this to be a plug and play for as much as it can be, while also incorporating the, unique factors for each high school and career center.
Yeah, Mark, it may be helpful for everybody on the call to understand that, like, when we say 2 high school credits, that's the equivalent of about 150 instructional hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's kind of generally how you view your courses, and that's how sometimes we can look at this and say, okay, we can pair up 2 courses, 2 post-secondary courses to put in to make up that 1 secondary course, is because we've got about 150 instructional hours in that model.
Hey, Tony, just a couple things real quick. So it's per the 2 credits in high school is equal to the 150. So it's 2 to 150. Okay.
Yes.
I just want to clarify that. Yeah. And then down here where it says 2 to 6 credits and a capstone. So a capstone experience can actually be as large as what they've already done up here because of the 6 credits.
That is exactly right. So the reason why we kept the capstone that way, so what we really did in our model is we took that level 1 course that the career centers were doing all 6 credits of the level 1 courses, like when we had welding technology 1 or something like that. And we've just broken those 6 credits up into 3 equal courses. And then we left the capstone experience pretty much similar to the level 2 course. And the reason we wanted to do that is, 1, it was kind of like whatever they could get was kind of a bonus, but it also allowed the career centers to have 2 full years of programming as long as we provided those 6 credits.
At the higher level. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's helpful. As we start looking at some other things, we can associate time and look at what classes.
Yeah.
So that's helpful.
So if you're thinking of it, I mean, that capstone course is anywhere from 150 to 450 hours.
Okay. Excellent. Yep.
Tony, I have a question as well. So when I'm looking at the course, like let's say the first course, it says that it's 2 credits and it's breaking down into 2 semesters and you get 1 credit for each semester. Does it mean that like one course has been broken down into 2 courses and are being taught in 2 different semesters, or is it just 1 course, but you finish part of the course and get a credit, and then you finish part of the course and you get 2 credits?
It really just depends. There are most of the concentrator courses are paired with 2 post-secondary courses.
Mm-hmm.
In the principal's course, for a couple of different reasons, there's times where we just put 1 course in there, 1 post-secondary course that would be taught over those 2 credits or those 2 semesters. The reason why I've said that is we are working on some things right now, like transition skills to be put into that principal's course. Really want students to understand that they're taking a college level course. Would like to build in some things about how to be successful in a college level course, and also some more like pathway information, as well as some employability skills. So when we could and still meet the credential requirements, we kept the principal's course to 1 post-secondary course, kind of as a soft landing or a soft beginning for that student. But in other cases, in the concentrator courses, generally speaking, we've paired up 2 post-secondary courses with the idea that generally we were hitting something that was between 96 and 128 hours that we could put into that 150-hour block of time.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this was something that we discovered, we kind of ran across as we were building out the model. And I think it does a really good job of demonstrating what we were trying to accomplish. You look at that, the first thing that you see is the kind of the reddish arrow there at the top that says secondary to post-secondary, and then down below you have the adult career pathways. One of the things that we really emphasize to people constantly throughout this process was that when we are talking about technical skills like welding, like automotive, construction, there is no high school welding and then college welding. It's just welding. And so there was no reason for us to have these two distinct programs in our CTE programs. We didn't need like a college welding program through Ivy Tech or VU and a high school welding program that was different, you know, for secondary school. So that was the first thing that we really talked about. But by making that, by using that as a base for what we were trying to create, that allowed us to backwards design from the post-secondary and design out the secondary program of study. And you can see what we were really trying to do is we wanted to ramp up and get our programs of study to those middle skill jobs. And we wanted to get them ready as close as possible to the applied associate's degree and being able to move on to that as a next step. So I think this is a really important graphic for us just to understand like what we were trying to put together and what we were hoping to accomplish. It does a pretty good job of kind of showing all the aspects. I think the other thing that's really interesting about this is the exact same way that you guys have built out your certificates, your TCs, and your associate's degrees. And I was going to say this earlier, and I want to make sure that I emphasize this. Next level programs of study is really about restructuring the secondary CTE programs. It's not about changing the post-secondary programs. And I think that's been one of the misconceptions that's kind of gone along over the last 2 or 3 years, is that people were at the post-secondary level, they were fearful, like, you're trying to change my program. No, we were just trying to understand your program so that we could put it into a model that would fit within a secondary program. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I would just add too, to looking at the screen here, you know, it talks about, you know, the stackable credentials into an associate, potentially into, you know, a BS, you know, kind of that 2+2 TSAP approach. But really with dual credit, you know, a lot of this can become a 1+1+2, you know, first year dual credit, then coming to Ivy Tech, finishing out that associate, and then moving on to, you know, a 4-year, depending on the program, if that's available elsewhere. I will also mention too, that, you know, with the revamp of all these course standards on the high school secondary perspective, you know, really the thing that hinges on whether the course is going to be offered for dual credit or not is whether the instructor is credentialed by our, you know, policy that's found in ASOM 7.1. But all across the state, you know, students are going to be taking, you know, are going to be using our course objectives as the framework for the CTE programming moving forward. So we want to, you know, obviously if the instructor is not credentialed, we can't award dual credit. But if the instructor is credentialed, if the equipment is on par with everything that we ask of for an on-campus experience, then we want the, you know, that career center or high school to be able to offer the course for dual credit, because it is, for all intents and purposes, it's been designed to be a college course in high school.
Yeah. I use words all the time, like directly aligned, backwards design. What that really stands for is, yeah, we copied your standards and we just put them into a high school format. So there shouldn't be the need to like do standards reviews as much, because their standards are going to be your standards. I did want to share this just because I think this is the one graphic that every time we share this really helps people to understand what we were trying to create. And it's very similar to the graphic that we just showed you. But if you look at this, anytime you see gold, you can pretty much assume that that means concentrator courses. So if a student takes the first 3 courses, then what they're going to be able to do is they're going to get, they have the opportunity to earn some certifications. More times than not, those certifications are the same exact certifications that are embedded within your program. And then earn those dual credits. And if a student does that, they should be able to go out and be an entry-level welder. My guess is an entry-level welder probably makes more than $38,000 a year, but that was the numbers that we had at the time. I think when you look at the navy blue, again, navy blue is capstone. So within that capstone course for this particular pathway, the student's going to have the opportunity to complete the CT in structural welding. They're going to be able to, if they take the entire capstone, they will have completed all of the technical courses that are required for the TC. Hopefully, if there's any general core or general education courses, they've also picked those up and they can be awarded that TC. And then also through VU, then that we were aligning to their CGs, which are very similar to the TCs. They can use all of those courses from the CT and the TCs to apply to those associate's degrees. And it just kind of keeps them moving down the pathway. And it's also the situation of, let's say that I'm a student and I graduate high school and I'm a concentrator, and I decide after a year on the job or something like that, I want to go back. All right, well, I just go back and pick up where I left off. I don't have to start over with that program, especially if you have a situation where a student has already earned the certificate. You know, they can go back and get the TC. They can go back and get their associate's degree at any point in time. I will tell you, you know, we put the bachelor's level on there. We are well aware that career pathways, career ladders are not always linear, especially when we go from 2-year to 4-year. There's a lot of bachelor's degrees that will use that experience, will use that foundation that they've built, but it's not always a perfect linear straight line that I go from the associate's to the bachelor's degree. But you know, I think this graphic probably helps to explain the programs of study better than anything else that we've put together, or at least I hope we do. Want to talk a little bit about the timeline. You know, you heard Rebecca say winter of 2019. That's when all this started. I really wanted to kind of point out some timelines on here. If you look in the fall of 19, we had our first convening working group, and this was the first time that we brought post-secondary instructors together to try to kind of learn about your programs and try to figure out how we could map these out. We had a second convening in the winter of 2020. One of the things that we talked about during our NASEP presentation that we did was we should have kept those groups going. We should have just continued those groups and made them standing working groups. And so if we had it to do over again, and I think one of the things we'd like to work towards is building kind of these standing committees of secondary and post-secondary instructors to help us keep things up to date is really important. But I did want to point out that we didn't just make this up. That, I mean, and some of you know this from experience, right? I mean, I'm seeing Glenn and Verl. I can't even imagine. I don't even want to think about the number of phone calls that we have had and the conversations that we have had over the 3 years, where we were trying to get input, where we were trying to work through a challenge and to do this. When we got to the spring of 2021, we We contracted with Inspire Success, and they organized and facilitated our final like standards development sessions. Those standards development sessions brought secondary instructors and post-secondary instructors together, and post-secondary instructors from Ivy Tech and VU together to help us kind of build out the final standards. Where did we have to maybe be a little bit more neutral with language? But generally speaking, I will tell you, there is not a lot of difference between the courses that are direct aligned to Ivy Tech courses. There is not you should not see a significant difference between the standards that you use in your courses and the standards that are listed in the high school courses. I will tell you the one thing that we did not do at the high school level is we don't require them to take the certification exams just because the funding and everything else isn't quite there for us to require it yet. But we still put in there, this course will prepare you to take that exam. So there's slight differences like that, but you should be able to look at that and say, well, this is my course. This is exactly what we teach. And even though a lot of people told us, oh, you're going to have a terrible time trying to map between Ivy Tech and VU, it really wasn't that way. We had a great response in doing that. Just real quickly, this is how we did this. And I will tell you the little kind of funny, humorous part behind this is when we started this process, we said, if we develop the welding program of study, then we'll have a template and everything else will map like that, and it'll just fit into the template. That has not worked one single time in this process, but it was a good thought. But it is a pretty good example of the way we tried to build out the programs of study. So the first thing that we would do is I would look at Ivy Tech's certificate program and all the courses that were required, and all of the TC program, and look at all the courses that were required for that. And then we would just start backwards mapping those to secondary courses. As I told you, the principles course, if we could, we tried to keep it one post-secondary course because we have some transition standards that we know we want to build in there. When we look at the concentrator A, when we tried to pair two courses together, we took some things into consideration. One, we thought about prerequisites. We looked at what your post-secondary prerequisites were. We looked if there was a co-requisite requirement, like a concurrent enrollment requirement, and we would put those in there. If we didn't have those, we just tried to find two courses that were related. So in this case, 108 and 206 is advanced or basic and advanced shielded metal arc welding. Well, that kind of made sense to us just to put those two together. The same thing when we got to 207 and 272. Those are basic and advanced MIG welding. The reason I've highlighted all the way through 208 and 273 is because that's the certificate courses. And I can't believe that I actually pushed back on this idea now, but it was Ivy Tech's idea to come to us and say, well, can we have students go through the certificate courses first? And now that we've done it, it makes perfect sense, right? We schedule all the certificate courses first, and then we schedule in the technical certificate courses. So 203 and 210 are the two courses that are required for the technical certificate in welding. I think the other thing that, like I mentioned, there's 450 hours. Basically 3 2-credit courses in that capstone course, and you're probably wondering, well, why aren't there 6 post-secondary courses in there? This is a perfect example where we wanted to have work-based learning time in the program of study. So if a student wanted to go out and do an internship, there's 150 hours embedded in that course that student can go out and do an internship program. This is maybe the key part to kind of understand like post-secondary to secondary and how we develop this, I think you can realize, all right, like if our basic process was to look at your TC and then the CTs, I hope you can kind of see how we would arrive at some of the decisions that we did. But are there any questions about this? I literally could tell you, I mean, no two programs were alike. There was always a different set of criteria to consider. And that was the reason why we had so many phone calls, because anytime we ran into something, it was like, hey, we need to have a meeting about this. We need to have a discussion about this.
Tony, I have a question. So if there is a pathway, and I was looking at the document right now, and this might be a question for Will as well, and probably for the committee, but if there is a pathway where there are no courses in, let's say, ITCC alignment, is it because of is it from our side that we have not approved that particular course for post-secondary pathway, or is that something like we need to work on? So for example, I was looking at cybersecurity, and I saw that there was no courses in ITCC alignment section. So just wanted to know, like, how does the process work for like us adding courses into that pathway?
All right. When we say are we talking about ICC as in like the
Sorry,
Indiana College course?
I meant Ivy Tech Community College.
Oh, so the difference is what you may see, Shabir, what I know is you have multiple certificates in cybersecurity.
Right.
And so we didn't align to all of them. We aligned to the most prominent ones, and we started with the technical certificate. So, and what the other thing that you'll see is we included cybersecurity under IT operations.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of your pathways in cyber, informatics, networking, all kind of start with that foundational set of courses.
Right.
So what you're going to see in those pathways is that the principles, the concentrator A and the concentrator B course are all the same, but then we have a separate cybersecurity capstone course where they will finish up the technical certificate requirements.
Right. So when I was looking at, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong document or I'm looking at the wrong section, I was seeing the IT cybersecurity, and I think this might just be for Vincennes. That's why I don't see any courses for IB Tech in it. So that could be the
That
reason.
is exactly right.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Ivy Tech cybersecurity program is under the IT operations pathway.
Yep. Got it. Thanks.
That is why. Sorry about that.
Oh,
and
no
again,
worries.
that was just one of those things that we were trying to map out, and we couldn't get, there wasn't enough alignment between VU's cyber program and Ivy Tech cyber program that we could make it one separate pathway.
Okay. Thanks, Tony.
And then I'll add too, I don't know, maybe this was part of your question, Shabir, but if you're, adding a pathway, obviously it requires conversations with Tony. But then, if we are missing courses on the dual credit crosswalk, the curriculum committee that oversees that particular program has to vote and approve that course to be added to the crosswalk. And then after that, it gets presented to CAOC, and CAOC then formally votes to approve that course to the dual credit crosswalk as well. So depending on the time of year and if the curriculum committee is, meeting in the spring or, multiple times a year, a quick process of that could still be 3 or 4 months. Glenn, did you want to say something? I thought maybe you came off the mic.
Yeah, I just want to applaud Tony and the group here for the work they've completed. And just because we haven't been meeting regularly lately, our committees, as has been mentioned, has been reviewing the next level pathways to make sure they're current. And then also, Tony, I wanted to talk to you, and we've talked about this, and I've shared some statewide equipment lists, but we are collectively working on individual course required material / minor equipment / equipment to really help the high schools understand, because we're finding some situations where they're trying to run a welding without those high-powered TIG machines, for example. And if it's a TIG class, they won't be successful if they come to Ivy Tech. So those type of things we're continuing to work on as continuous improvement. I also want to bring up, and I brought this up many times to Tony, is my big concern is, we have movement in the positive direction at Ivy Tech. How do we keep the changes current on the high school side? And I gave you an example. We're changing objectives to improve our curriculum. How is that going to transact over to the high school side on your next level pathways?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we knew all along is that as soon as we got these developed, that we were going to have a regular review process. We're probably looking at a 2-year review process. I think on the flip side of that, I think the one thing that, like, I know when you make a change on campus, then you kind of have to grandfather that change in, right? That you have to, yes, this course will also count, but this new course will count for that certificate. But, for a couple of years, we're going to run that. We're going to accept that other course as part of that certificate. I think the one thing that's probably going to have to happen on your end is that process. Maybe you may need to keep that in mind for an extra year as you're doing this. To just kind of keep in mind that, hey, there's a high school student that may have completed that as a dual credit course while they were in high school. But I think, again, the other part that I would say about that is this is why it's so important for high school students finish that certificate, because then that makes it so much easier when they come to Ivy Tech or VU, because they can, hey, I've already earned the certificate, so I'm ready to start on these courses. And I think that'll help to map it out. But Glenn, we've got about, we probably won't do that this year, but certainly next fall, we're going to start a review process where we go back and start looking at all the standards. And I can tell you, when we were going through this process, we had CTE courses that had standards from like 2013, some from 2011. It's like, okay, that can't happen. So it's going to be a challenge, but the good part is, you're going to keep us current. We're going to have to keep working to be current, but I wish I could tell you that, oh no, we've got that all worked out, but we will get there. One other thing I wanted to point out there, Mark, before you go into that next slide is, so if we have courses that are not on the dual credit crosswalk, we still align those to our capstone courses in hopes that even if that student couldn't take it for dual credit at their high school, there's a possibility of them going and taking those courses through dual enrollment. Now, there are some other capstone options that students have available to them that if their high school can't provide that capstone option, but any course that was required for the TC that wasn't on the dual credit crosswalk, we put into the capstone course in hopes that we could have at least the opportunity to do dual enrollment possibilities.
So Tony, I have a quick question for you. It's not really about this, but it kind of is. So some of these courses have certifications attached to them or embedded in them. And so we require our faculty to get those certifications. And the concern from some of the deans that I work with every week is that some of the faculty have not passed those certifications. Some of the dual credit faculty have not passed or taken those certifications. We offer that all the time, that opportunity to take those at no charge. So I'm wondering if maybe you or Mark or someone has a suggestion on how we might, incentivize or get them to be interested in getting those, because technically they're not credentialed if they don't pass that certification.
Yeah. So Sue, it's good to hear that you offer those free of charge for dual credit faculty members. We appreciate that. We were just talking yesterday in our meeting with Rebecca and Mark about we have some reserve grant funds that we're going to, we provided some last year as well, but we think that's a great opportunity to use those funds to help make sure that dual credit instructors do have those certifications that they need in order to be credentialed. And we've really talked about in the standards. I talked earlier about how we say that like students will be prepared for this certification. We've also made it clear to our instructors that if the student is taking that for dual credit, they have to take that certification. It's just if they're not taking it for dual credit, then that they would have that option of not completing that. But and we're going to talk a little bit more about credentialing requirements and how do we credential a program and what is necessary. But I really appreciated Glenn's comments about the equipment list by course. That would be so helpful for us to be able to go back to secondary schools and say, hey, listen, this is the equipment that you have to run this course. We've really been trying to get to that point. It's just been, most of our work's just been trying to get this implemented and going so far.
Yeah, and some of our, like the SOC courses with the SOC credentials do have equipment lists that go along with the course because there's certifications, and so they have to pass that. But okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Keeping in mind and being respectful of everyone's time, I'm going to do the next slide here kind of quickly, but you can just see how, K-14 and dual credits, as we have a large focus as a college and institution on completions, and keeping in mind 50,000 credentials of high value as a goal here annually that we're trying to meet. You can see the larger part that dual credit is playing with that, with the college, but then also especially how the CTE space is going to be a big part of that dual credit chunk. Just using round numbers, you can see roughly 6,000 completions right there from dual credit last year. The ICC taking about 2,000 of those, and then the rest of them largely being from the CTE space. This is an impressive figure, but this number is also just the tip of the iceberg because largely NLPS for most schools and career centers, this is year one of NLPS being rolled out. So keeping in mind the CTs and TCs that students will be earning through these sequences, we really won't see the fruits for a lot of that until, maybe 2 or 3 years from now. So, it is not unreasonable to think that this, CTE number, could triple or quadruple in the next handful of years. And as the college gets towards that 50,000 completion goal, having a vested interest in it in the dual credit space, I'm sure that dual credit's going to be the thing that gets the college across that line. Because right now, roughly statewide, 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 of all completions earned by students through the college is in dual credit. That number is probably going to become, 1 in 3 here in the next handful of years.
Just wanted to share this. This is one of the recommendations that came out of the governor's workforce cabinet, but I think it's a good example of what we were trying to build when we built the next level programs of study. And the recommendation here is that for a student who completed 1 year of college while in high school, that they would be awarded a scholarship to complete that second year of college through the state of Indiana. We have a couple different possibilities that you may see. We've also talked about expanding like the next level jobs program to include this, but when we've talked about this, this has been received very favorably. So we're hoping that this will get passed into legislation. But one of the things though that I wanted to use this slide to share with you is the intent of this has never been to get students a credential while they're in high school and then have them stop. The goal has always been, how do we get them a jump start on what they're doing so that they can earn that credential, that first credential, but then have them be able to build upon that, stack upon that, that next credential. And nothing would make me happier than if we look down the road and we start to see, those kids that look, college was never an option for them, or they didn't think that college was an option for them. But because they were able to complete a year's worth of college or something while they were in high school, well, all of a sudden, well, I can get an associate's degree. I know I can do this. I've already done this level of work. I can do this. We've been heavily involved with a pilot program here in Indianapolis called Accelerate Ed, which is all about trying to get students that associate's degree, specifically really trying to target some of these applied associate's degrees for students. So, and I don't know when we first started thinking about this model, but you know, like Mark and I were talking earlier about TSAPs represent this 2+2 model. We'd really like to also have that be an option of, you know, like a 1+1+2 model equals that 4-year degree that, hey, 1 year while you're in high school, 1 year at Ivy Tech or VU, and then 2 years at that 4-year college to get that bachelor's degree as an option. So just keep in mind that the goal here all along has not been to decrease your enrollments at Ivy Tech. It's been to provide a pipeline of students to Ivy Tech that are well prepared and ready to go. You know, the greatest part about this statement is from our Perkins 5 plan, and it's the size, scope, and quality aspects of this. And the reason why it's important is if you are a post-secondary program that wants to use Perkins funds, then you have to either meet or be working to meet size, scope, and quality for that post-secondary course. There was a heavy emphasis in Perkins 5 about we needed to have secondary to post-secondary alignment between our programs in CTE. So we made that a requirement of size, scope, and quality for a post-secondary course. The best part about this is we hardly ever had to pull this out and say, now look, if you want to use Perkins funds here, you got to do this. You guys have been so great to work with over the last 3 years that we didn't even have to talk about this. But we wanted to kind of make sure, you know, we have it in there. And again, it's more about a vision than it is about compliance. And that vision is let's blur these lines as much as possible going forward. And I think this was one of the biggest challenges that we had. And as we were going through this was, I think sometimes we didn't necessarily both come to the table with, and I should say we all three being our office, secondary and post-secondary, as far around dual credit expectations. And this really came down to credentialing requirements. I think, please hear me on this. We have never asked you to change the requirements for your courses. We don't want to see the quality of those courses lowered in any way. But we do want to see if they have a credentialed instructor, if they have the right equipment, if they have the facilities, if their curriculum is aligned, the more that we can allow them to do for dual credit, the better that is for students. And hopefully in turn, that will encourage more students then into that pipeline that we were just talking about. As we were doing this, I mean, our preference would be for every program to say, hey, every course that's required for the TC is required for or is eligible for dual credit, as long as you meet whatever those quality requirements are. We knew that was going to be difficult in some cases. So if we can't do the TC, then we asked, can we do the CT? Because we don't want to get a student 4 courses into this and then they have to go someplace else to get 1 course, because that's probably not going to happen. So if we can get through the CT, and then at a bare minimum, it was the courses that are aligned to the concentrator sequence have to be available for dual credit. So that's kind of where we've settled on. And again, the preference would be let's let's look at, can we make the TC available without lowering our standards? And if we can, let's do that. But, you know, and this may be some things, you know, we heard different things when we talked to different faculty members. Well, 200 level courses can't be applied for dual credit. It's kind of like, okay, well, we have an eligible course, a 200 level course over here in this department that was eligible, that we've been doing for years. You know, don't make it about the students. Like, well, students in high school aren't mature enough to do this. Okay, well, we're doing dual enrollment programs with those students, and we'll accept those students as dual enrollment students. So why, you know, are those students more mature somehow than those things? So I think if we could do anything going forward, I think really kind of coming to what's the criteria, what's the requirements for dual credit credentialing, and I don't just mean of the instructor, I mean of the program as well. That we can do that, and we do understand, Verl, we worked through this like on the engineering technology one, that your ADET accreditation really, you know, kind of makes this a struggle. We respected that. You know, we still tried to get as many courses as we could. And we do take this, we have a lot of conversations with our CTE directors, our CTE teachers about, look, they can't lower their standards for this, that you have the HLC standards that you have to meet for credentialing of instructors. So just because you think that they're a good instructor doesn't mean that they can automatically credential them. And we are not going back to IB Tech to say, well, we want you to accept this person, or we want you to lower your standard for that.
Yeah, and I would add here real quick too, you know, when we were going through the NACEP accreditation process, just by luck, you know, this overlapped with NLPS being implemented and developed at the same time. And a lot of those things that Tony discussed, you know, whether it's, you know, worries about, you know, student maturity or student quality of work, or, you know, the instructor quality or things like that, like the NACEP standards that we've implemented are really designed to address all of that, whether it's, you know, through onboarding, syllabi reviews, site visits, you know, everything else that the NACEP standards require. All of that is designed to ensure that what is being offered to students via dual credit is being offered in a standard that is as similar and in many cases probably exceeds, because of the NACEP particular standards, what's required on campus. So I know we are right at the end of time. I will stop sharing my screen here. Tony and I can stick around here for another minute. We only had one other slide that was more or less just future steps, which we've already kind of discussed upon. But with all that being said, if anyone needs to jump off, by all means do that. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask right now. We do appreciate all of you taking some time to join for this chat this morning. Maybe we answered it all. Yeah. Well, the PowerPoint slide deck is in the is in here. Like I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Tony, Rebecca. We are happy to have any of these conversations.